Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again on our conversation of community and addictions. Today, we're just going to start talking a little bit about the intersection of faith. We know I serve as pastor here at the church, and it is wonderful. So I know when people watch these videos, some people have some questions about the minister's involvement in this conversation. And so my involvement as a pastor here in this conversation that we have is kind of like multifaceted. One is I care very deeply for our community, for our area and our families here. Um, I care very much about what God's plans and designs for His people are, and I care very much for just um, the power that God wants to work in our lives. And so, all of that coming into bringing faith into this discussion and the importance of the impact on faith getting people clean. Um, some people, I don't know how many people are aware of some of the history surrounding Teen Challenge and how Teen Challenge was this particular treatment center, how it was birthed and how it came about. And it started the I would probably say the first drop in the bucket about Teen Challenge had to do when a minister in a small country church with a white picket fence, no joke, a small country church, a pastor from a small country church that had a white fence and everything, was just convicted of just how much time he was giving God. And so this pastor, he sold his television to devote his time to prayer instead of watching television, which how many of us have the conviction to do that? And a week in, he was praying, and as he was reading the newspaper, and he saw an article with a picture of a group of teenage boys from a New York gang going into a courthouse. And he said when he saw that article, he saw that paper, he just began to weep. And God stirred in his heart to go to New York. And so this man left his church and went to New York and met at this courthouse where these boys were going through their court case. And it was these uh, drug gangs in New York, and this pastor, his name is David Wilkerson, went into that place and uh, put himself in that line because he's like, no, Jesus died for these teens so that they could have um, a clean, holy life. And so he put himself in a line to reach a group of people that were being cast aside and not being reached. And it was so fascinating. And so that's kind of the inception, this idea of doing whatever it takes to reach those that demographic. And what's even more so, as David Wilkerson began to reach those teens, those kids, he began to um, share with them the love of God, and one in particularly was the leader of a gang. This leader of this particular gang was into drugs. He was I mean, the one of the most deadly gangs there in that time in New York, and they they came. Um, and they really roughed up David Wilkerson for what David Wilkerson was doing. And all he was doing, he wasn't like, hey, no, you need to get your life straight. You need to get off these. You need to get off the streets. You need to stop. He wasn't trying to fix the gang. He was simply going and saying, you need Jesus, and that's really all he did. That Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. As he was getting shot, as he was getting stabbed, as he was getting beaten. A great book, Crossing the Switchblade, is that story of what David Wilkerson did to reach the leader of that particular gang, Nikki Cruz. Fast forward to today, Nikki Cruz is this evangelist that goes over South America, and just an amazing man of God. But it started with a man who said, "No, you meant for you're meant for something more than this." And I think that's why faith is so important in this whole aspect is, you know, God has made us so wonderfully and fearfully made, as the Bible says, but we're meant for so much more than what the drugs do to us. Like we're meant for so much more than the lies that they give us. the destruction that it wreaks on our lives. Like, we're meant for so much more than that. And that recognition that that God has a greater plan for us than staying stuck in this habitual pattern of life, um, is, I think, in one sense, the motivation on why it's so important to uh, come into that regards. Some fascinating stuff with that. Um, so I want to kind of take the two sides, and so I want to first kind of maybe talk about, if we were to take this conversation of the impact of faith. I want to take it from the I want to split up into two parts here, and maybe starting off with the impact of personal faith on the side of the addict, the one in the recovery, and then once we discuss that out, come alongside and maybe in greater detail than in videos in the past, talk about why that component of faith is so important in a faith community, and the nature on why that plays such an important part with reaching out and being a part of that. As we go forward in this conversation. So, in the past, you in past videos, you've said why it is so important to have that higher power, that recognition of a higher power to reach, and why that's such a vital thing for the addict to recognize that you can't do it on your own. Um, does that resonate? I mean, it is kind of making sure that kind of remembrance there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just a few thoughts on what you said. So, in my addiction, I believed that that's all I was meant for.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it was hard to make any kind of connection.
Yeah.
As far as a spiritual, uh, you know, God or Jesus or all that. And so, um, I think that it's difficult,
yeah,
to approach an addict,
right,
with you need Jesus in your life,
right,
because we don't believe in ourselves, our lives, right, or anything else. Um, Obviously, that changes,
right,
as you kind of go through recovery. But it's hard for an addict. I guess I should just speak about me, but it was hard for me as an addict to relate at all to a church.
Mm-hmm.
To me, church was, it wasn't what I think it is today.
Right.
What I thought about it then was obviously at this point it's just unimportant to know why, yeah, or what it was, but I had a different thought of what, yeah, church was.
So if I might be, if I could be a little bit bold on this side of things, maybe, and maybe even like maybe paint a picture, an assumption of a picture on what you probably thought it was like. And I'm going to base this off of like a stereotypical, everyone's in their suits, everyone's clean, they got their lives put together, or maybe, well, it's all maybe even a cult. It's like they're all going to be so fixated on this one thing. And I might be wrong, but just kind of the idea that like there's this, like you said, that there's this, I don't want to say distinction, but maybe this dissonance between the two that makes it really kind of hard to grasp.
Okay, so I guess this is honesty moment.
Yeah, hey, that's all right.
I thought churches were hypocrites.
Yeah, makes sense.
And part of that was because no one was reaching out. No one was trying to help. Not that was their job.
Right.
But, you have this picture in your head of what like the church is supposed to be all about. Let's help the community and let's do this and let's do that. And they weren't. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was because, kind of why we started this conversation.
Right.
I don't know if it's because it was like a blind side for them, mm-hmm, when it comes to addiction or what, or it's just you have the community that actually comes to church that you definitely are involved in and need to take care of. And so, and I'm not saying this church in particular, I'm
Right.
just talking about in general.
Well,
This is
capital C overall
right.
church. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the way that I saw things,
Yeah.
and then it was judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, ugh, they're gonna look at me like, a certain way, or whatever, and so there were some issues,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there's probably a lot of addicts that see things in that way,
Oh, for sure.
but uh, even to this day, I still have trouble with, uh, you know, being involved with the church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting better.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah,
it's a growth process, really.
right. But there's that, because in recovery, it isn't about church.
Mm-hmm.
It's about faith,
Right.
and it's about trust.
Right.
In your higher power.
Yeah.
They call it a higher power, and it works to get them started, to
Mm-hmm.
get people started. For me, it my higher power became God.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, well, has always been.
Yeah.
Didn't just become, but
The
I just didn't
recognition.
recognize it at
Yeah.
the time. Um, so one of the importance about, like you said, recovery is that you need to have faith. You
Mm-hmm.
need to develop that faith. Well, I thought about this before because we had talked about it
Yeah, we had some
a
conversation
week
behind the
ago
scenes. Yeah.
or two that we were going to do this particular one, and I realized that um, going so in the beginning of what I thought faith might be is kind of like love,
Mm-hmm.
where when you meet someone, you get these
Oh,
butterflies
yeah.
and you feel all good and everything else, and you think that that's love.
Right.
Well, that dissipates at a certain point,
Right.
and so then it comes down to, okay, what it really is. And love is an action to me.
Yeah.
You make a choice every day to um to love that person,
Yeah.
or love people in general, or whatever that is.
Yeah. There's a funny scene in an old Jimmy Stewart film,
Mm.
and I believe it's called. I think the film is called Shenandoah. And one of the opening scenes of this film is the Jimmy Stewart plays the patriarch of this family, and he's got a daughter, and there's a young man coming to call on his permission for this young woman.
Right.
And so this man comes to just get dad's blessing, dad's permission to start a relationship. This is all set during the Civil War era. As this young man's having this conversation with Jimmy Stewart, he goes, well, "Sir, I'm here because I love your daughter. I love her." And he goes, "Well, that's great. Do you like her?" He says, "Well, no, sir. I love her." He goes, "No, do you like her?" He goes, "Well, I love her." He goes, "No, you're not hearing me, son." He's like, that love stuff, it just goes away. It's done. It just evaporates. It's gone. Now you like her. That's what makes it last. Do you like her? And this young man's got this confused. Yeah. All right then.
Right.
But that whole idea that that love is such, like you were saying, is that we have that initial butterfly feeling, but then there's something's got to be behind
Right.
those butterflies.
So, to kind of put that back into faith is that I think that in my recovery, uh, at the beginning, uh, they they kind of talk about that you need to have faith that things are gonna, they're going to work out, and but they do it in kind of a weird way where it's like, okay, these are the promises. This is what will happen if you
Mm-hmm.
continue down. So they're kind of priming you to have some sort of faith.
Right.
Well, at a certain point, I realized that faith was not something I felt.
Right.
It was an action. It was something that I did.
Yes.
And whether that meant for that day, I just needed to keep moving one step at a time and have faith that God was going to take care of whatever the situation or whatever is going on.
There's a section in the book of James, in the Bible, book of James, and he says faith without works
Right.
is dead.
Right.
And that whole idea that you can say you believe something, but until you actually put work behind it, until you actually do something about it,
Right.
it's pointless. I like it. There's a when we lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, there was a bridge that was stretched across a major road, and this wasn't just any regular bridge. This was a glass pedestrian bridge,
Okay.
and so you have three kinds of people that walk across this bridge, and you have the ones that will hug the rail, literally they're gripping the rail as they walk across. Then you have the other group is the ones because there's a center beam, a center steel beam that ran through the middle of the bridge, and you have people who would thread that center beam right down the middle, and then you have the completely out there people who will run and jump and skip across every panel of glass on that bridge.
And they probably walk
It,
across it.
it does. Well, and that's like I like to use that bridge as an example of faith because we can sit there and be like I'm over here, I'm over here, but the more times you cross that again and again and again, realizing it can hold your weight,
Right.
you can jump on it, it's not going to
Right.
fail. Now there's a mind game because you look like you think it's going to snap when you step on it, and you can see the cars rushing beneath you, and you're like, I'm not going to deal with this.
Right. Right.
And faith is kind of that same way. It's like at first it's very very difficult to cross it, very difficult to actually start doing it. But the more you lean on it, the more you do something with it, the easier and easier
Right.
it becomes.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody just develops faith as if it's like, oh, here we are, you know.
Yep, I'm here. I'm crossing.
So it makes sense. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. Where, I kind of had to hold the rail and
Oh yeah.
crawl along with it, but I had to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I
No one can do it for you.
No, nobody can do for you, and everybody can tell you what faith means to you and everything else. But in the end, it's you. You have to,
Yeah.
like they said, don't use. Well, in order to stay in recovery, I have to not use. So I have to have faith that that's part of what's going to work.
Yeah.
Go to meetings. Okay, so I don't know why this works, but I'm gonna go ahead and just do it.
Yeah.
And that's how you develop get a sponsor,
Yeah.
and talk to the people, be involved in the program, and then be involved in the community.
Yeah.
And so it's these small little steps
Mm-hmm.
that you have to take.
But those small and it builds into something bigger.
Absolutely.
And
That's
I
that
think
was what I mean. It's
yeah.
it's a small little step I have to not use.
Yeah.
Okay, well, once I get that kind of down, like, okay, I'm not using, I got to go to these meetings, so it
Yeah.
expands a little bit, and you have to have faith in the process.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I have to believe that it's going to happen.
No.
It just means that I have to follow these guidelines that have been set out for me, from previous addicts, that
Yeah.
this is how it has worked.
Well, and that's in Revelation. Revelation says they overcame. Talking about those who have gone through suffering, it says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb, which I want to talk about that moment here in a little bit because that's a huge component, with the faith and forgiveness part that I want to touch on here in a bit. But they become the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and I love that because we're so quick to talk about what Christ has done for us, which is huge, and that's a big component. But then the other equal component is other people's stories, other people's testimonies, and what they've gone through, and how they got clean. I love how you said other addicts process and what they went through, and now they're handing it back to you. So their testimony is saying, "Here you go." And what's fun about like what we're doing here, it might seem kind of silly putting it online at times, but then there's so many other people who are receiving from this that is helping them overcome situations that they're facing. So even your story is having this ripple effect that's impacting other people, and it's so amazing because we can sit there and be like, yeah, this is just the way society works. But even then, this is something like the Bible, written millennia ago, had already dictated for us. This
There's
is
an alignment.
it aligns up, and so it's so fascinating that like what we have psychologists telling us, it's like, well, actually, it's over here already. It's
Right.
like so it builds up into that.
Right. And sometimes that's hard to understand. I mean, to go from feeling like there's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't believe in anything, you believe that you're just destined to
Right.
be high and everything else, and then to go to the program or whatever it is that works for you for recovery, so there's a process, and then at a certain point, I think you get to a Bible. I
Mm-hmm.
would hope. I don't know.
Right.
What works for some people, but when you start to read that, you start to realize that there's a lot of alignment in a lot of the things that happens to get you where you're at
Yeah.
in recovery. And faith to kind of get back to that a little bit. So faith is a very strange thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really practice.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was taking a test, I would practice because then I feel good about taking the test. I have faith in that it's going to turn out because I practice this. Well, it's the same thing with recovery. Is that you kind of need to practice, and your faith will come because you'll start to see, it you'll start to see that, well, when I've done this, it
Right.
even if it didn't turn out quite the way I thought it would, it's never let me down.
Yeah.
And so then that builds that little bit of faith for you, and not only in something else, but in yourself,
Yeah.
because you need to have faith in yourself as well.
Well,
So,
yeah, no, and that's good. I wanna kind of bring in if it's okay right now, to kind of bring in the topic of forgiveness,
sure.
because again, that faith and forgiveness are so really key points in there. And like the lie of the drugs, of the addiction, is that you're stuck in this, and so, and correct me if I may be a little bit wrong, but the impact of shame that one feels, it inhibits them from being able to be self-forgiving. Like the idea of, like, you can't forgive yourself for what you've done, kind of thing.
Shame is a so I would say that shame is it's kind of fake.
Mm-hmm.
It feels real,
Right, right.
but the thing is that when we shame ourselves, it's 10 times worse
Yes.
than what it really is, or it's based off of uh, something that has happened that we can't change.
Right.
So yes, forgiveness is a big part in that, to be able to allow yourself to um, get away from the shame, because uh, the, so shame is an addict's crutch,
Mm-hmm.
because if I continue to shame myself, I feel like that's the addiction talking to you.
Right.
Well,
in my
do I still
experience.
feel shame about things at times? Yes, of
Oh, yeah.
course. But the multitude of it, or the how it multiplies itself, or the extent of the feeling of shame is less.
You get rid of it more.
Right.
It's almost like your shame is up here,
Sure.
and your forgiveness, your faith level is down here. And as you go through this process, you kind of feel like it's still there,
Right.
but now you've reached a place where that shame's gotten less and less, and your faith has grown more and more something else. And then now you say, okay, I'm able to forgive myself. Yes, I still feel terrible for what I've done. I feel guilty for these things, X, Y, Z.
Right.
That's still there.
And that's kind of that whole idea. Up here, shame is controlling you. Down here, shame is motivating you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference,
Yeah.
and that has a lot to do with forgiveness and faith.
Well, and you're taking your crutch,
taking those steps.
You're taking that crutch that the addict leans on,
Right.
for whatever.
That's that little monster.
The little thing that, and you're sitting like, no.
Yeah, I've seen you.
Like, I'm switching it. Like, it's gonna motivate me to go off in this different direction,
right,
as opposed to I have to lean on it.
Right.
And so
it kind of plays into that. I've talked about this before, about these little tapes that we play in our head. So shame is one of those little tapes that plays that tells us how bad we are, how we don't deserve things, how, because of something that may have happened, or whatever. And so that, to me, is that addict replaying that to keep me as an addict, and so you need to change those tapes out, and you need to really, like, and the only way that you can change them out is you need to take a step at a time forward in life, and just you know, so I think a lot of people feel like faith, like I said, faith is a feeling, and I don't see it that way at all. To me, faith is an action.
Yeah. Well, I want to.
and,
Yeah,
and I need to step
yeah.
forward continuously so that it builds itself, because I keep doing this, and then I look back and I think, oh, you know what, that worked. Well,
Yeah.
then my faith builds, you know.
So,
And I'm not saying, I know that you're talking on a different level,
yeah.
as far as faith goes, but I'm talking on an addict's level.
Well, and so I want to combine. I want to combine like the level I'm at,
Right,
with where you're at right there. So
right.
I'm actually like, because I have this point I want to make,
Sure.
and I want to arrive at that thinking process.
Right.
But I want to, in order to arrive there, I'm actually going to backtrack a whole other process that's going to lead us to this moment.
Sure.
Um, in the Bible, God created mankind because He desires to have a relationship with us, and so it's a wonderful relationship, and His love for us is so great. But in the process, man, filled with selfishness, pride, whatever, we chose something other than God, and that downfall, it created a mess of things, and the Bible uses the word sin. Sin is actually an archery term. It literally means to miss the mark. Is what it means. So when we say we've sinned, what we say is we've missed the mark that God had designed for us. That's all it is. And but then the problem is, for missing the mark, the punishment, you've missed it. There's only one option, is destruction. You broke the law. It's over. Um, but and so that's kind of where the direction that mankind has gone in. But then you get to John 3:16, and it says, "But for God so loved the world that He sent His only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life." And what's amazing about that is that God loved every single individual so much. The Bible says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, and that Christ, that God loves us so much that He sent His only Son to be in our place, which is an interesting thing. Like, for an addict to hear that someone loves you so much that He died for you, like He took your place, your position, in the midst of the junk that's being involved in as far as the addict is going. I mean, prior to the recovery process, to hear that, hey, someone loved you so much that they went to the furthest lengths possible to get to you, and that's we've talked about the mind of an addict, and the self-deception that goes on in that. But to hear that somebody loved you so much anyways, despite the addiction, despite the past, despite the records, despite whatever family's done for you, you are so valuable that the Son of God died for you. That's his love right there, and that whoever believes in Him can receive this new life in Christ. And then in that process, one of the things that the Bible tells us after that moment of believing on Christ, it says that we are changed, we are transformed, we are made new. And then there's these really fascinating terms: by the renewing of your mind, by the way we think. And so there's something about when we walk with Christ and we accept that love and that sacrifice, what Christ has done for us, that it actually can impact a changing of the way that we think. And this is where I want to come back to what you were talking earlier about, this process of like the addict's mind has got to change. The way you think about things has got to change. And then we see that walking with Christ helps facilitate walking in faith with that higher power, walking in faith with Christ, with God, and all that kind of stuff, helps facilitate. I'm not saying it's instantaneous that you wake up and I follow Jesus and your mind's changed, but it's that walking that faith and stretching it more. Going back to that bridge mentality. I'm hugging the rail because it's my first time across this bridge. As we do that more and more, our thinking begins to realign, and everything, like the whole view of things, just change. It's not instantaneous. It's a process, like we've been saying, but that faith comes in where, because of His love and His reaching for that, and what He's done for you is so great.
So I think for some addicts that happens pretty quickly. You will see some of them who become on fire for God.
Yeah.
And that whole idea. But for me, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It took years of just continuously to move forward. And but there was a certain point where
Yeah.
it changed, and and I like for some people from here to here, they've made that decision. Well, it took me to get to here
Right.
before it started to happen, and I think that that's probably the uh, most significant
Yeah.
part of recovery is finding that spiritual part of yourself, and and really relying on a higher power. And by relying, I don't mean like, okay, he's gonna get me out of bed and
Right.
take care of my bills and all
Yeah.
that. No,
No.
I mean relying on a higher power, as in knowing that as I continue to do what I need to do, that he's going to take care of my life,
Well, and you
and
just
point me in that direction that I
you
need to go.
you just described in essentially what it means to walk in faith. Like it like yeah, there's many of us like it would be so great just to like wake up and have God's hand on just fix everything.
Right.
That'd be great. And yeah, I'm saying this as a pastor, man. That'd be so
Right.
nice.
And for some people that
And
happens.
for situations, you accept stuff like that happens. Well, wow, praise God, you're so blessed. Recognize your gift, because
Right.
for a vast majority of us, we're walking a process of faith that's
Right.
being developed in us, and that can take anywhere from days, weeks, months, years, many years,
Right.
and that's something that we've had to learn and to grow in.
Right.
But that's the process of, I will do my part, and he will do his.
Right.
The whole idea of arriving at eternal life. The Bible says nothing can take us out of the hand of God. No height, no depth, no evil, nothing can take you out of the love of God.
Right.
And that's true. Nothing can take you out of that. But if I choose to walk out and I refuse to do my part in it, guess what I've done?
Right.
I've allowed myself to arrive at that place.
Right.
And that's a huge part in there. You hear the door creaking there. That is my little one. So bear with me a moment. He's recording. I can't hear that. Okay. Anyone, can you help me? Help him. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, buddy. Thank you for the patience there. I had to deal with my youngings, my little kiddos. But anyhow, yeah, that's that idea that nothing can take us from the love of God. But yeah, if I refuse to do my part, then I'm. It's a relationship between the two. Faith is that relationship that we have in that, and that's
well,
the important part.
Obviously, like I said, it took me probably longer than others. Maybe I don't learn as quick. I don't know, but
yeah.
But what I do realize once I got to that point is I realized that my whole life had built up to something else, and the things that I went through, there was reasoning for it,
right?
And whatever, and I don't know what that is exactly, but now I realize that my life went the way that it did, so that I could be here at this very moment.
Yes.
And I don't mean like here as in like, I mean,
right.
As on this video, I mean like just in general, my life is where it is because this is where I was directed to be.
Yeah.
And so when you start to think about it in that way, you have faith that there's a direction.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was using, I didn't know there was a direction. I couldn't see it.
Right.
I didn't feel it. I didn't care. And now I don't know that I care what the direction is.
Right.
If that sounds, I don't know how that sounds exactly, but I have faith in it.
Right.
That this is where, whatever it is. And, kind of like when you began, you were talking about, like your congregation, you have, you care about them and you want to direct them and you want to, all that. Well, that's how I feel about addicts. Is I have a passion for them, a compassion. I have empathy. I have all this going on, because why? Because I've been there.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
experienced this,
Well, it's
and I hate to see, that everybody has to go so deep
right.
into it to really like snap them out of it,
Yeah.
and you know,
Well,
so
you see a group of people over here,
right,
and you know because you used to be in that camp and you're in someplace else.
right,
You're in someplace else and you see the old camp and your first thought is, guys, there's more.
right,
There's more to
right,
life. There's more to what you're going through. There's more than what you're giving it. There's the only answer is there's
right.
you could have a greater family life, you can have a greater work life. I mean, there's just so much more possibilities than what the world has led you to believe.
Right. Well, it's not even the world. It's just that you know when you're on drugs, you got such a tunnel vision that you can't see
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe I
beyond
say
that.
world, but I also mean like the world of drugs.
Right.
Like whatever
Oh,
whatever
I got
your
you.
your world has led
Right.
you to believe this.
Well, even the world will tell you that
Yeah.
they have not been kind
Mm-hmm.
to addicts, you know, and
Yeah.
there's a reason for it because addicts have a tendency to really cause chaos.
Well, and that's
And just like damage,
yeah.
and just destruction, you know. So I
Yeah.
get why the world looks at it the way they do, but my hope is that we can change that thought,
Mm-hmm.
that idea, because you know they're destructing their own life, themselves too.
Yeah.
And if you have any kind of care, concern, or compassion for a person, you know, just in general, then why not try to help, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to help is to get healthy. And how do you get healthy? You gotta have faith and
Yeah.
forgiveness.
Well, and I think that's too because I want to switch gears here with that the community of the world around that and what the world and the world of drugs, so the multifaceted things that have kept people back, and like talking about maybe like the intersection of like why, and maybe you've hinted at in past videos on why maybe churches the church capital C um might be one. I want to talk about like why it is so important that the role, like why the church can be the greatest tool to help people get clean, why they should be the greatest tool, and then at the same time why they are not. For starters, I think that the hindrances is based out of just the uncertainty, you know, the unknown. Um, because again, I mean, let's be honest. If you have no idea, it's a lot easier to ignore something than it is to engage it when you don't know what the world entails. The other big thing that I see is that in its pursuit of being very clean, the church has become sanitized in the sense that we're not willing to get our hands messy to reach those who need to be reached. And so we say you can come, but when you come, you've got to be like this, and that's an immediate turnoff. And like you had said earlier, the idea of the church is a bunch of hypocrites because you know the junk they're supposed to be doing and they're not doing it, and it's this idea of uncertainty and sanitization of it all. But I want to go past those hindrances on why churches just don't engage and go to why they should be the greatest tool there is. And that goes back down to the whole idea of what has Christ done for you as for individuals as like the addict, the one in recoveries, is that Christ died for you. And so now we take that mentality and we turn it on its heels to the church and tell the church, what is the mess that Christ has saved you from? What junk has God done for you, and how great it is that the Son of God, that God sent his only Son to die in your place so that you can have new life. And it's not just for you, but it's for other people as well.
You know, there's a good point in there that you're making, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
But there's a good point in there is that you, not you in particular,
Mhm.
but you coming to me and saying, you know, God died for your sins. My immediate thought is, well, he died for yours too, you know?
Right.
And coming at someone who's an addict as an entity rather than as a person,
Right.
there's a difference, you know, because when you immediately say the church can do this for you, I start to think I don't want to deal with the whole church.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But so now, so now I'm gonna sit there and be like, why I'm using the church collectively, but now as an individual within the church.
Right.
So not the corporate building being that tool,
Right.
looking at you as like a product and like, hey,
Right.
we're gonna get this product into our church. No. Now let's take the church and let's boil it down to what it is: the family of believers. So now we're talking about families. Now we're talking about brothers and sisters. Now we're talking about moms and dads. Now we're talking about individuals, and those individuals have each been given an amazing gift, and how it has made and transformed their lives. Are you going to withhold that amazing gift, knowing that God has given it to every single person? Like, and that now see that therein lies the rub. It's like, why are we holding it in? Why are we allowing ourselves to let some people?
Well, I think that so because I am where I'm at in my life, I think that
This is why I love our conversations.
right. I think that people have their own gifts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you know, like I don't think my gift or whatever you might want to call it, my conversation is going to be, well, you know, God
Right.
put His only Son to take away your sins. Mine is hey, you know, we have hope.
Right.
You know, there's hope, and why is there hope? Because you know I've actually walked it.
Yes.
And I've seen it, and I know how to do it. You know, well, you know,
Well,
as far as I've gotten today,
yes.
I know how to do it. And so,
yeah,
you know, this is how we can do it, and then I care enough to be able to open that conversation for everybody else to hear.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like for me, like the church's motivation.
For you, it's a different.
Well, it's the different words, words. Because the motivation,
your gift is to give that hope,
right,
but in a different kind of conversation,
right?
You know what I mean? And your goal in that is to get to them to really understand that you know God gave His only Son. You know what I mean? Like that is your goal.
Right.
My goal is not even close to that, and because that's not where I'm at. You know
well, it's and I'm using my vernacular and like my gifts, and why I love our conversation, because again, like the motivation stems from this idea is the life you're meant to have is so much greater than what everything is telling you, what every other lie is being told to you.
Right. The world will tell you all kinds of lies.
That's the whole idea. It's like whatever lies you're being led to believe right now, you're meant for so much more than that.
Right.
And that's a conversation, and that's a very broad term.
Right.
Because again, I'm coming from
talking to you.
I'm talking to everybody here, and I'm using this because we're having this conversation. Right. But that motivation, you know, that whole idea of you're meant for so much more is an umbrella term to whether it's your spiritual life, your addict life, your work life. You're meant for so much more. Right. So don't settle for status quo. Don't settle for the addiction. Don't settle for the lies of whatever. Right. You're meant for, your life is meant for so much more. It's so much more meaningful, not just to your family, not just to your friends. Your life is so much more meaningful. Going back to that faith, it's because again, so it's like this whole motivation is how important is your loved ones to you, and why as a church, the depths of motivation that individuals, that Christians should have for that whole idea that your life is meant for so much more, the motivation level. Now, everyone's got their path on how they're trying to help somebody get over that your life is meant for so much more. But the motivation for the church, and why I believe it should be one of the greatest tools, is because the motivation for the church has such a greater depth to it than any other faith out there. Because what other faiths out there have that the deity took on flesh, dwelt among them, and willingly died for them to forgive them of their sin? Like that, what other faith is like that? It's a very exclusive nature of that. And so for the Christian, our motivation is so much deeper because of the inherent value that we recognize. And so now, from recognizing that value that humanity has, now we come and we say to the addict, you're meant for so much more.
There's a lot there.
There is. And
that's a lot there that you just kind of put out there. So, I would say that it frequently happens for addicts.
Yeah.
I've seen it where uh, the film is taken from their eyes,
Yeah.
and they can actually start to see their life and
Yeah.
themselves for what it really is.
Yeah.
And and that happens over time. Like I
Yep.
said, of having faith that this is going to work out, or it's going to work out, or it's going to work out. But it also takes that honesty with yourself um, to be honest with yourself. They call it rigorous honesty, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Well, that makes sense. I mean,
But
very,
you
very
right, you
like
have to be
the raw.
honest, but in that honesty, you can't be critical.
Right.
And there's it's hard to separate that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, and it takes time and practice and work. But if you can really just be completely honest with yourself, um, and say, okay, well, this is something that needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this isn't right. Or yes, this is what I'm doing, and this is good. Because it's not just one or the other. It's all of it as a collective.
Right.
So in order to get to a place where you can really see,
Right.
it requires honesty, real honesty, and I don't think that that's just for the addict. I think it's everybody,
Well,
in general.
it is. I was
The
talking to
community that surrounds them,
yeah.
the ones that want to help. For you, you would have to be honest with yourself. Okay, where will I make mistakes?
Right.
Where can I flourish
Right.
in this whole idea?
Well, and that's like recognizing my shortcomings or even the shortcomings of others is this idea. I was talking to another pastor in the community the last couple of weeks, and this nature of grace coming into play and how we, as pastors and church members, that we have to deal in measures of grace, and that I need to be gracious. I need to be understanding, um,
right.
even in a level of forgiving, in understanding my shortcomings when I've fallen short, when I've made mistakes, but also at the same time when it comes to the mistakes of others and what they have gone through in their testimony, and being that idea of, I why would I withhold that grace and forgiveness from somebody if God has already given it himself? And that's where like this whole level of understanding comes into play.
And so what you're talking about is humility.
Yeah.
And being humble, and it's hard sometimes to approach things in that mindset, or that whole idea, like, okay, I really need to humble myself, because um when you're trying to help somebody, if I just come out like, you need to change and this, that, I mean,
Right.
whatever, it's really just not, it's just gonna right through,
Right.
because
Well, that's where
okay,
this understanding of the individual comes into play,
right.
because you want to make sure that whatever words you use, however your dealings with those individuals.
I don't know if it's words.
Well, that's why I switched to dealings with
Right,
dealing
yeah.
with individuals, because you want to make sure that what is being communicated, either uh, verbal, written, body language,
Right.
interactions, whatever level is the dealings are going on, that there is a level of how is this person going to respond,
Right.
and how can I contribute to this?
Right.
Is it going to be something that I can contribute in a constructive manner, a productive manner, or is it something that I can destroy or completely ruin? And that's where this whole sort of humility comes in, and saying like, I want their benefit.
Right.
I want what is best for them.
Right.
And what do I need to do? Now, sometimes that means being overly gracious. Sometimes that might mean being a little bit firm. But it's all about that humility of like, I want to make sure that what do they need?
So let's say you personally approached an addict,
Mm-hmm.
and you said ABC, right?
Right.
and then I approach the addict and I say ABC. There's a difference.
There is a very big difference.
And and it's not, um, I don't know. It's not because you're not a good person, or
No.
it has nothing to do with any of that. It's just that I've been through it,
Right.
so I would probably be a little more harsh than you would be because
Right.
I've been through
Well,
it.
and that comes
But
down to that
but they'll
testimony.
listen because they
Yes.
know I've been through it.
Well,
Or
and that's it. They can know your love for them.
right,
They can know they don't doubt your love and your appreciation for them.
right,
But there's a level of disconnect
right,
because you don't know what I'm going through.
right,
You've
right,
never you did not choose to do these things.
right.
You
Like
know.
I wouldn't know how to approach somebody as a pastor
Right.
because I haven't gone through all that.
No.
I don't. I've never. So they probably wouldn't listen to me quite the same way as they would if they were seeking a pastor.
Right.
And so that's kind of some of the, and that's what I mean by humility is that even at, like for an addict, it's connection.
Right.
It's like it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Just I want to tell you this real quick, but so I can walk into a room
Right.
of people I don't know
Oh yeah.
and sit down and tell them something that I would never tell anybody else because they understand and they know they've probably been there. They've probably done that. They've probably, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
There's and so that might be in the beginning. That's probably some of the disconnect with the church because you don't necessarily. I don't know that I would walk in and be like, hey, I was using drugs yesterday. What are we gonna do?
Right.
Whereas I can go into a meeting and I'd be like, this is a struggle and I don't know what to do, and they'll be like, hey, we've been there, we know this, and this is how we did it. You know what I mean? So
that's where context plays a big role in
right.
this.
So maybe I'm not telling anybody how to do anything, but maybe for a church to approach it would be to learn it first.
Yeah. Well,
You can only learn
right
wise, I guess. Yeah, I don't mean go out and start getting high.
Yeah, don't do that.
So let's not do that.
Add
part.
to our core audience here. No,
Right.
I think for me, it's going back to why the church is hesitant on it. So the uncertainty.
Right.
Okay, one, you have no reason to be afraid of it. So don't afraid of the individuals, afraid of the world that it creates. So don't be afraid of it. Be willing to get your hands dirty. Talk to those individuals. There's somebody that they're loved ones that Christ died for as much as you, and so engage in that. Don't sit there and hold this sanitized view of things.
And I think so I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you on just about everything you've said. I think that if you really have a relationship with God,
yeah,
that He will tell you when that time has come.
Yes.
And
yes.
so you
yes.
need to be able to listen to that. And because you can't just, you can approach somebody at any given time if you want, but I feel like God opens an opportunity
yes.
in that person, that mind, that set, that whatever it is. And
yep.
because we have a tendency to ignore that.
Right.
And that's the one thing that I have stopped doing in my life is ignoring that whole idea that God has set up an opportunity, no matter what it is.
Right.
Because it ain't always about approaching an addict. Sometimes it's about, this person just needs to hear.
Well, one of the things that I tell our church on Sunday nights when we end our prayer group, one of the things I tell our church when I'm closing that night out on Sunday nights, I tell them, you take advantage of every encounter God gives you. Every encounter that you come to, you take advantage of that.
But don't manufacture it.
Don't manufacture it.
Right.
Take advantage of it. Yeah. And I think too, I want to kind of dovetail on this too. The idea that the church is out to fix everything. Humility says you have limitations. Sometimes you can't fix the issue, and you can't fix it. And so you know what? Guess what? The church might not be the recovery center, but you can start the process and get them into a place that is.
Right.
Like that's where you use the entire tool belt you've been given instead of this is how it has to be. This is the process. No, church, you have the value, you have the motivation. Take these individuals and put them with people who have the tools. Like your conversation, I can think from a pastoral perspective. You come up with somebody who's got lived experience, and so these two conversations now are converging. These 2 points of view are coming in this great convergence right here, and it's wonderful because you have stuff that you think through, you process in a way that has wisdom and value that I've had to study and learn and converse with to get a portion of,
Right.
whereas yours is lived experience. And that's what so value to recognize that humility says I may have the motivation, but I don't have the tools.
Right.
So how can I partner with somebody who's got the tools and bring my motivation, and we can come together and make this happen?
Right. And so I have a few thoughts in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, so the people, okay, which is kind of what we started this about, it's the people who surround the addict.
Yes.
I think that that's the people that would be focused for, because the healthier they are,
right,
the harder it is for me as an addict to be chaotic and destructive as
right.
So do you have to touch that individual directly? No. But like you said, there's ripple effects,
Yeah.
So if this person is changing, well, it ripple effects into everybody around them, and those people who are unhealthy are going to feel those ripple effects. Those people who are healthy will probably start to converge and come into that.
Yeah.
And I know that this is a whole thought process,
right,
that I'm sharing, but so and is that how it really works? I don't know.
Like I said, we're not the experts.
Yeah, I don't know. But these are thoughts that okay, well, maybe this could help. As far as the church, being able to directly, for an addict, I think showing kindness.
Yes.
And like maybe popping in once in a while and saying, here, why don't we have lunch?
Yeah.
Just mindful things that so that when that addict is, because ultimately the addict is the only person who can make this decision to stop.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So but for me, the people that I flocked to, or whatever you want to call it, were those people who, when I was using, found themselves being like, here, I'm here. We don't have to talk about the drugs you're doing and the bullshit you're pulling. Excuse my language, but we can just spend a moment and have a meal, or go for a walk, or what I mean. Like, well, you there are people around you who are healthy. Yeah. And so when you're trying to get healthy, who are you going to seek out? I'm not going to seek out those ones who are not, or who were pushy, or who were, what I mean? I'm going to seek the ones who are healthy enough to be like, okay, I'm okay with what you're doing because I have to be. Right. But here, this is a better life. Here's something better. And it's about presenting your own life. Yes. In a way that is non-intrusive. Right. And I hate that whole idea, because I feel like the world has become about, oh, poor me, or and just don't be intrusive, but at other points in life, though, there are some times when just seeing is better than being told. Yeah. Well,
they tell us.
I don't know if that made any sense.
No, it does. In seminary, one of the things they always teach you and always remind you, and pastors, we have these conversations, and they always talk about what they call the power of presence. And it means power of presence, it simply means the impact just being there can have.
Right.
No agenda, no plans, no prepared statements. I'm there to have time.
And while you're there,
I'm there to sit with
and
you.
here, and this is the other part that I wanted to bring in from before what I said is that if you do that, there will be an opportunity, and God will open that up, and you will know,
Yeah.
this is my moment. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't think about it. Just do it. You know what I mean? Because there's a difference in just like you wanting to be pushy,
Right.
and there an opportunity for because it'll happen.
Yeah.
It always does.
Well, and that's the kind of the beauty, and for the sake of time, I think we're getting ready to wrap this up right here.
Sure.
But one of the things that's so beautiful is just the idea of relationships.
Right.
That idea of I'm just being present. I'm spending time with them. No agenda. There's no big plans. I'm sitting with somebody that I care about, and letting the opportunity or the encounter create itself.
Right.
And then taking advantage of it. Let God direct those steps and how that plays out. Having faith. But that's one of those things where if you're present, and this is the other thing too that's important about presence, that we kind of talked about shrinking the addict's circle, the chaotic circle, and having a healthy community to surround them. That being present, that loving, caring, firm, gracious presence keeps that circle there, and that's why it's so important. That value there is so important, and
Right.
so it's really important. Anything you want to add before we kind of wrap this one up?
Well, so kind of what you were talking about, I would just kind of want to throw this in there.
Yeah.
So, my relationship with you personally, is an odd relationship to have.
Yeah.
And probably for you and also for me, but we both took a leap of faith.
We did.
Because we wanted to we both had maybe a different motivation, or maybe maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
not in your head.
It was there.
Right.
Whatever motivations we had were there.
Right. But
and
we
the
listened.
goal.
But what we did was we listened to that. Okay, there's an opportunity.
Yep.
Let's do this, and over that period of time, we've developed something that is more than just us talking.
Yep.
And that's kind of the whole idea of what I think you're saying, is that if you just spend some time, you can develop that relationship, and you can develop some sort of connection, and I feel like you empathize with me.
Yep.
and the things that I've gone through, but I've also talked to you about things that you've gone through, and so I have a little more empathy, and my understanding of what you do has increased, whereas your understanding of what I do has also increased. And so and how did that happen?
Right.
What is it's because we continue to just move forward.
Yeah.
And have a little faith.
Well,
this whole idea was God's idea.
It was God's idea.
Was it?
It was
for you. You probably are like, yes, it was. And for me, I'm like, I don't know. I just know that I have faith that God is in my life, and He's going to direct me.
What's amazing how this has grown. Like, not even just the online, but just the relationship has grown.
Right.
And the empathy, the care, and the understanding we have between each other has really has grown.
Right.
And it a little uncertainty at first. Had no idea what was going to happen when we got into it. I think we're watch the first episode and see the intimidation that we might both be expressing in that recording. But but as it's grown, as we've sat down more and more, the ability to speak into each other's circumstances has increased. Right. There's stuff that we can say to each other now that will be received completely different now because of our relationship and how we've had these discussions and we sat and spent time together. There's the exchange is a lot richer, maybe more impactful than where if we tried to have the same expressions exchanged when we first started back in spring.
Right.
that when we started there, it would have been completely different. And so, why am I saying all this? As you spend time with your loved ones, as you spend time with those who you're motivated to reach, let the relationship develop so that you can say things to them. Don't just sit there and be like, I'm gonna go encounter this stranger on the street and I'm gonna change your life. No, you need to know that stranger.
Right.
And love on them, feed them, spend time with them. And then as you develop a relationship with them, then there's gonna be ways for you to say things that'll be much more received than
Right.
just out there.
Right. And to kind of bring it back to why we even started this conversation today is that you just kind of have to have faith.
Yeah.
And faith to me is you just move forward.
Yeah.
And I honestly do not see faith as a feeling. I don't.
No, it's more than that.
I was thinking about this before, and I kept thinking, it's not something I feel. I don't feel faith.
No.
I actually I practice faith.
It's more of it's less of a feeling and more of a possession.
Right.
Like it's like
action.
it's an action. It's something that you just it is very weird. It is belief, it is deeds, it is doing, it is
definitely a combination.
It's a combination of all those things. It's not like
right.
Hey, I can see or I can hear. It's not like any of that.
But the weird thing is that when you do it, you can see it, and the way you can see it is you can look back and be like, oh, because I moved forward, this actually happened.
Look at
for me.
Look at this. I crossed this bridge.
Right. The glass bridge. You got to a point where you're running across and jumping up and down on it. Well, how did that happen? Well, because I kept moving forward, and to be I don't know that as an addict I should always be looking back, but I look back because I want to see, and I can't always see it.
Right.
Sometimes it actually has to be pointed out to me. I know that people have pointed out, like, man, you've really come a long way. Really? And then I look back and I think, what do you mean? And then they'll say, well, you've changed. The way you think, the way you talk, the way you do things has changed. And then that's when that honesty comes in, and I have to think about it, and it's like, okay, yes, this has happened.
Yeah.
And that's where your faith builds, is because you get to see, if you just keep moving forward, you get to see
what your
faith has done.
I want to see this too. Really, really fun story about looking forward, and maybe your faith journey is starting, but you're seeing other people whose faith journeys have been going on for so much longer.
Right.
I did one. I had one fun experiment on this glass bridge there in Tennessee. I had walked on it multiple times, and I finally got to this point where I'm going to jump on it. And so I found somebody who was walking and holding onto the side rail, and I just walked, and I jumped really high, pounded on this glass. I mean, because I know how strong this stuff is now. So I mean, I made a big pounding show of it, and a few of the people that were on the rail holding the rails, their eyes went really wide as they looked at my direction, like, who is this nutcase and what is he doing?
Right.
And it's because this understanding, like my faith was not where they're at. Right. And they look at the steps that we're taking, and they are maybe a little blown away by how extreme out there it might seem, but it's because I've stretched myself to this place.
Right.
And so, on the one hand, this is why it's so important that we come alongside one another, and let people see our victories, let them see where we've come, but at the same time, we cannot be so hypocritical to judge those when we're still holding on and we see them doing extreme things, and we think, why are they being so stupid? Why are they being so careless?
Right.
No, their faith has grown.
Right.
And you know what? That's where I need to be instead of just right here.
And then it goes both ways.
It really does. It goes both ways.
The addict also needs to really figure it out. Like, hey, this person's trying to harm me. But as an addict, you're stubborn. You don't want to hear it. You're stuck in your own little stupidity. Yeah. And you're going someplace that is not going to work out very well. Yeah. But, I love that whole bridge idea, because I was thinking to myself, I'm like, where would I be at with a bridge like that? Well, I'm a risk taker. So I would just have a leap of faith, and I would probably be the first one to start jumping. before I ever started crawling on the thing, because that's really kind of how I am, you know.
And
But
it helps, and it's a great way to play.
which is very strange when you think about it, because when it comes to God, I've been a complete opposite. I've had to walk along that. So why am I like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. And
well, that's the idea of faith, is that unseen element, and because with a bridge, even with a glass bridge, you can still see the panels of glass, so you can see the supports. You know it's being held up, and that's kind of that example is a little bit. There's a little bit of fails in that example.
No, there's not.
But
because you can still see.
You can still see.
But if you really look through your life, most addicts, if they look through their life, they will realize that there are times when they probably should not be here anymore.
Right.
There are times when situations happened that if they would have went even a little bit differently, it would have. You know what I mean? So even as an addict, I realized that there was something greater than me working in my life. But
you don't want to jump when
I ignored it. I was ignorant. You know, I couldn't wrap my mind around it, because at that moment, the only thing I had faith in was that drug was going to alter whatever was going on with me.
Well, that's kind of the importance of those who walk in faith. Don't keep it to yourselves. Share it, extend it, help come alongside, and love them, and
be proud of yourself.
Yeah.
Be proud of yourself for having that faith, because that's not an easy thing to do.
No. So and we praise God for that. So we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation. We hope you enjoyed every bit of it, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye.